So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to want to do is go ahead and create a new project. I'm going to want to go ahead and create a new MVC2 web application when my new project dialog comes up. So let's go ahead and name this MVC and delete system exceptions. Now it is going to ask me to go ahead and create a test project. Because we're not going to worry about that now, I'm going to go ahead and say no. In a real situation, you would of course want to have a test project. So it's finished generating my test project. So let's go ahead and run this now so we can see the default output. You'll see that's the standard MVC template, nothing major. And the only thing we're really going to do here to change the look and feel is I'm going to add a new link up top here that will allow us to throw a system exception or a 404 exception so we can handle trapping that. So let's bounce back to our code. Let's go ahead and stop this, and let's first start off by modifying our shared master file, our site master file, excuse me, so I can add a new link here, and we'll call this throw 404. And what I just did is I put a action method on a controller that does not exist. Now, because I'm doing this at design time, you are seeing this a slightly different color, but we'll pretend to ignore that for now, because by adding this will allow me to actually throw a 404 exception or a resource not found exception. So to get started, the next thing I want to do is I want to come into my global ASAX file. And I want to add a new method here. This new method I want to add, I want to go ahead and create a protected application error method. So let's do protected void application error. It's going to receive an object sender, an event args e. And this is where I'm going to provide my application exception logic to be able to route to the appropriate page, whether it be a 404 or a 500 or any other system error that I want to take care of. In order to save some time, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste some code in because there's a lot of it here, as you can see. Now let's go ahead and step through this code so we have an understanding of what it is I just provided. The first thing is I went ahead and I grabbed the last error that came from the exception stack. I went ahead and cleared my response. I'm setting up some default routes, so I'm creating a default route to a controller with error. And then I basically said, if there's no exception, go ahead and route to the index of my action. Else, let's go ahead and handle which exception is. So I'm going to grab the error code. And if it's a 404, I'm going to add my route's value. So I say my action is HTTP error 404. And I'm doing the same thing if I have a 500. And of course, you can add on for additional HTTP codes. Then finally, if I cannot find anything, I go ahead and go to my default index. I finally go ahead and clear out my error. And I create an instance of my server, my controller, and I go ahead and execute it. In fact, you see that right now I don't have my error controller. So let's go ahead and create that now. Let's go into controllers. I'm going to right click, do add controller, and I'm going to go ahead and say error. Now what's nice is with MVC2 you have these templates that will allow you to quickly create things like controllers and views. So I'm going to go ahead and click add, and it comes in and it by default will create me a index action. But the next thing I want to do is go ahead and create my 404 action. So let's do public action result. And we're just going to say return view. Now of course both of these are red, so now let's go ahead and create our views for our error controller, our error views, excuse me. So in views I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder. We're going to call this error. I'm also right click, add a new view. And here I'm going to say index, and I'm going to go ahead and use the add view helper. I'm not going to make it a partial, I'm not going to strongly type it for this example, and I'm going to leave the master page alone. So let's go ahead and click add. You'll see it creates the default view for me with index inside of my main content. Now let's go ahead and add one for my 404. Inside here I just want to add some details. Just provide some extra text so that we can ensure that we're at the right page. So we're now pretty much set up. We're good to go. I've created my two views. I've created my error controller, and you'll see that It's now gone from a red error indication to it's actually valid, which is good. I've gone back into my global ASAX. I need to add a reference to error controller, so I'm now good there as well. So I should be able to compile, and I can. Now the next thing I want to do is go ahead and run the application. But before I do that, let's put a breakpoint here. So my site is reloaded. You'll see that my Throw 404 tab is now enabled. So let's go ahead and click it. When I do that, I bounce directly into my application error method that we created on our global ASAX file. And if I step over this and hover over my exception is a public method Throw 404 was not found on the home controller. Well, we know that to be true because we explicitly set up that way, but I'm glad we got the right error. So let's go ahead and keep stepping over this. I'm now stepped over and I've got my HTTP code of 404. I've stepped into the correct case statement. I'm going to add a value to bounce over to that action. And if I just F5 through it, you'll see that, and sure enough, it does take me to my 404 error page. Now, of course, if I want to bounce everything to the same exception page, I can just leave it as index. But if I want to handle different exceptions or HTTP codes differently, I can have different pages that will handle that result. So again, just to recap, what do we need to do? First, we need to go into our global ASAX. I need to add the method application error. I need to add logic similar to what you see here. Making sure to add a case statement for every HTTP code that you want to trap. I then have gone ahead and I've created my own error controller. Inside of this, I have my default index, and in our example, our 404 handler. And then I've also created my page or my view that will handle my 404 error. I then ran the application, invoked a 404 error by explicitly providing information I knew was invalid. I then was able to bounce over and see that, sure enough, I was able to catch my exception and then reroute it to the appropriate error page. So I hope you learned something. Until next time.